Good afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on your location. Thank you for the opportunity to present our paper, Inclusive Spatial Practices for Professional Education, Exploring the Architectural Design Studio. The design studio reproduces the social hierarchies of the profession, and we look to address inequities that are revealed by the global pandemic. This has given us the opportunity to give a global rethink on the norms of the architecture studio through 6 inclusive contexts. In this paper, we address most of the conference sub-themes, but we would like to highlight 2. Managing diversity and inclusion in online learning spaces during uncertain times, and transitioning from traditional to innovative learning spaces. We are 4 authors from 3 continents. We met in May during an online conference, Teaching Architecture Online, Methods and Outcomes. Our work resonated, and we started conversing and then working together on a research project entitled The Radically Inclusive Studio, an open access conversation, which forms the background of our presentation today. We have submitted this as a chapter contribution to the upcoming Routledge Companion to Architectural Pedagogies, the Global South, that is edited by Dr. Harriet Harris, Ashraf Salama, and Anne Gonzalez-Lara. That will be published in the summer of 2021. To put you in the context, we will share something about ourselves, position our research in a conversation rather than a traditional presentation, and in conclusion, invite you to participate further in our research journey. We are all architectural educators and are interested in the pedagogy of the architecture studio, which is the foundation of architectural education. Our research has been developing through collaborative online discussions in which we share, reflect, and interrogate. We will conclude and invite you to join the conversation on our website. The sudden pivot of the architecture studio from on-ground to online learning settings was rapid and extensive, and turned the familiar world of architectural education upside down. Similarly, we believe that the known architectural pedagogy needs a dramatic shift to become more inclusive, whether online or on ground. We look towards a cultural exchange between the Global South and North and challenge the hierarchies and flows of this information, which has previously privileged Eurocentric voices in our architectural education. We came together across timelines and geographic divides. Our team, the authors, include myself, Associate Professor Michele Gorman from Pratt Institute School of Architecture in Brooklyn, New York, and Parsons School of Constructed Environments in Manhattan in New York City, both in the United States. Based in Brooklyn, I work at the intersection of architecture, social activism, and emerging digital technologies. As a design activist and technologist, my active work and scholarship is towards the democratization of technologies and the decolonization of the architectural curricula, which has been heightened since the global pandemic and pivot online. In addition, I host feminist exhibitions and roundtable discussions, and am collaboratively building an equitable database of resources for the architecture studio that opens relationships between the Global South and North. Dr. Lindy Osborne Burton, Senior Lecturer in Architecture, Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. Dr. Lindy Osborne Burton was raised in South Africa. She says, "It's impossible to be raised in South Africa and not be impacted by architectural responses to racial segregation. Spaces and places are a constant reminder of the painful past." While she has built a new identity as an Australian architect and academic, her African foundations will always underpin her sensitivities to Indigenous perspectives, and her approach to design, which is inspired by connections to nature and motivated by a pursuit of mental well-being. Jolanda Morkel, Senior Lecturer, Department of Architectural Technology and Interior Design, Cape Peninsula University of Technology in South Africa. Her first year practicing architecture was in a new democratic South Africa. After 20 years as an architectural academic, she now finds herself inspired by new challenges daily. Jolanda is grateful for brave students and supportive colleagues who through the years have helped her question, push boundaries, and break rules. 26 years into democracy, the changes are more rapid than ever, and the challenges are more severe. Dr. Hermie Elizabeth Delport, Project Leader Architecture and Spatial Design, STADIO in Durbanville, South Africa. Hermie's family roots are deeply entrenched in South Africa. As an architect, the diverse and beautiful context of her country influences her daily being and practice in architectural education. She is on a constant quest to understand how we can improve what we do, to adapt to the circumstances, to bring out the best in all of her students, and to contribute to improving the dire socioeconomic conditions that most South Africans live in. It is an honor to learn and work from this newfound group of colleagues where our individual local contexts, potentials, and barriers are discussed. The context within which this reflective work is situated is the architecture studio that is often associated with problems related to socialization, asymmetrical power relations, the mental health of students caused by stress and workload, and degree of ritualized teaching practices, and in online spaces specifically, aspects of social presence, authenticity, and embodiment. In our work, we recognize differences and similarities in our context that are visible in the composition of student bodies, staffing, and resources, as well as the need to address social justice and the call for decolonized curricula. Reflecting on various formal and informal online conversations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, we recognize a shift in approaches and practices in architectural education. This change fostered a culture of collaboration and care, an exploration of alternative methods and modes, but it also amplified existing inequalities, inequities, and exclusions, exposing structural limitations. If ever there was a perfect opportunity to challenge the signature pedagogy of the architecture studio, this was it. Never had the circumstances been so conducive to radical and dramatic change. The situation demanded a complete reset and redesign of a radically inclusive architectural studio that was responsive, resilient, and relevant. Through a thematic analysis of webinar data, we identified 6 inclusive contexts: systemic, structural, support, social justice, symbolic, and spatial, and then outlined initial list of inclusive practices which are aligned to each of these contexts. The Radically Inclusive Studio proposes an open access conversation on these radically inclusive practices in the architectural design studio to extend the exchange of ideas and collaborations. We harness the fluidity of ideas and exchanges within the space and seek to blur boundaries through a continued conversation with our external allies in co-authorship. A more detailed explanation of these inclusive contexts and practices follows, supported by examples of some of the online conversations that we recorded too. Thank you, and I turn it over to my incredible colleagues to take you through the outline of our inclusive contexts that form this paper and website.